Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Today is a proud moment for National Institute of Industrial Engineering with this inaugural panel discussion on leaders of change to women in supply chain. We formally commence a series of conversation on this rather critical issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, threatens the future, and renders the present inaccessible, says Maya Angelou, the famous American poet. Standing in an ever-changing world, we are collectively moving towards creating a safe future that nourishes flowering of human strengths. NITIE's DE&I Cell aims to make this meaningful contribution in this direction by creating awareness and sensitivity amongst the future managers of tomorrow. Our Honorable Director, Dr. Manoj Tiwari, who's also the patron of this event, has been the inspiration and support for creation of the DE&I Cell at NITIE. Sir, we extend immense gratitude to you for the heralding this new direction of change. Now, moving to the introduction of the panelists, it's truly my honor and my privilege to introduce our inspiring and diverse panelists. The distinguished panelist for the event is Dr. Sujatha Narayan, who is the Vice President and Regional Leader for Wabtec Corporation in India. In January 2021, Madam was featured amongst the Icons of India Incorporation, the Star List 2021, and recognized amongst the top 50 CXOs in Indian manufacturing industry. She was also conferred the prestigious honor of Rail Analysis Woman of the Year 2019. Besides her professional prowess, Sujatha ma'am loves to ski and is a famous basketball player. Ma'am, we extend a warm welcome to you for this event. Our next panelist is Lieutenant Sandhya Suri, who heads HR and communication at Tesla Power USA. Besides working for one of the most aspired brands of the world, Lieutenant Sandhya is an Indian Navy veteran, a TED speaker, an author, and a poetess. Sandhya believes that unusual is what excites her the most. Lieutenant Sandhya, extending a very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Our next panelist is Shubhrangsu, who is Director of Femcare Supply Chain at P&G. He is a thought leader and a champion of CSR initiatives. Shubhrangsu has seen the industry in and out through his experiences at P&G. Besides being the director at Femcare, he also loves coaching and he is a qualified coach. Welcome, Shubhrangsu. Our next panelist is Ashita Mittal, who is Planning Director, South Asia Unilever. With experience in planning and logistics, Ashita has served in leadership positions across industry trailblazers like Nestle, J&J before taking up her role at Unilever. Ashita loves road trips, and in the last 1.5 years, she's driven with her family from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Ashita, welcome. Our next panelist is Sharmishta Biswas, who's manufacturing leader at Johnson & Johnson. An experienced supply chain leader, Sharmishta is also a rights-based advocate and a champion of women in STEM. She's also an avid blogger and writes about psychology. Sharmishta, warm welcome to you. Our next panelist is Savita Gupta, who heads Procurement Knowledge Center at Maersk. She's been actively involved in strategy development, execution, new product development, and process improvement. She's also a marathoner. Savita, extending you a very warm welcome on the panel. The moderation of this panel discussion would be done by Mr. Venkatesh Seshadri. He's the head supply chain consulting at CII, that's Confederation of Indian Industry. Besides specializing in supply chain transformation for manufacturing companies, Venkatesh religiously reads one book a week and also shares the gist of the same with his communities. Welcome, Venkatesh. Thank you all panelists for joining us today. May I now request our director, who's the patron of the event, to please make his opening and introductory remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Basma. And first of all, I greet all the panelists and attendees of this event. A very good evening. And this is my esteemed privilege to welcome you all at NITIE platforms, though of course virtually. And I thank the panelists, right, starting from the Dr. Sujatha Narayan, Senior Vice President and Regional Leader, Wabtec Corporation. Ma'am, you have been nicely introduced to us by the Vakharji, who is well known to us and is our board member. And then Lieutenant Sandhya Suri, the Change Enabler, Head HR Communications, Tesla Power USA. And Sabishta Biswasji, Manufacturing Leader, Johnson and Johnson. Asita Mittal, Planning Director, South Asia Unilever. And Sabita Marshall, Head Procurement Knowledge Center, Head Mark. Then Shubhrangsu Dutta, Director, Femcare Supplychain PNG. And Mr. Venkatesh Seshadri, Head Supply Chain Consulting CI. It's my great pleasure to see all of you at this platform where we are talking about something pertaining to the leaders of change, particularly women in supply chain. And this particular sector, as you know very well, that the pandemic has proved beyond doubt that how important it is to look after the different aspects of supply chain. So this particular event is nicely planned actually to see that how those who are governing the entire world, particularly where our focus is on the diversity inclusion, particularly women sections, how they are powering behind this success. With this, I would also like to introduce the diversity, equity, and inclusion cell that we have conceived in the NITIE in line with the rest of the premier institutions of the world. And I just want to tell you that never before in the history that the Indian system may be deteriorated because of many of the past attacks on us. But our culture always suggests that we have to respect up to utmost level the women's section, and also they will be the partner in almost all the important tasks. And in this context, I normally used to share some of the well mentioned, you can say, quotes from the Ramcharitmanas, which are very much showing that how God was and how the our popular religious leaders, how they used to respect the women's sections. So here just I would like to say that a particular couplet is there, like say Jai Jai Girivar Raj Kishori, Jai Mahesh Mukchand Chakori. This actually Mother Sita ji was appreciating the role of Mother our Parvati ji. So Jai Garbadan Khanan Mata Jagat Janan Damin Dutigata. Nahi tau adi madhya avashana amit prabhav ved nahi jana. Means such was the power of women section that even Ved does not know that how powerful they are actually. And other very important line which I especially want to quote: "Dev puj pad kamal tumhare sundar mun sultan." Means those who love and worship the women section, for them nothing is rare in this world. So I just want to quote this in order to prove that it's our culture and our tradition, every respect that they have to be given utmost respect and inclusion in all aspects of economy, education, and all other areas. So NITIE is proud to have a legacy of almost 6 decades of developing bright minds into the brilliant leaders in different walks of life, particularly FMCG from supply chain operations, even many fintechs also. We have produced some of the world-class leaders, and they are heading the firms like Merck and many others, including DHEL also. And there were people with the heading the famous firms like Adit Birla groups and others. So this was the, you can say, well-conceived journey. And I think culture of this continuous learning and inclusion has always been part of NITIE. We believe that there is a power in uniqueness and strength in the inclusion. By that spirit, the diversity, equity, and inclusion cell of the NITIE has placed the objectives of building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive ecosystem, then promoting the voice of underrepresented, and fostering the dignity and respect in the workplace. With this motive today, this panel discussion involving the excellent leaders from the industry, very well qualified, and they have head on their different positions in the top corporate sector. So they are here, and my respect to all of them, and hope that those who are listening, they will be very, very beneficial, one of good beneficiary for such a important task. So with this note, I just want to express again my gratitude to all of you for coming to NITIE platform and welcome you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for indulging remarks. May I now request Venkatesh please to take the panel for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Tiwari and Professor Pasna. It's been a great time with fellow panelists and with a very diverse set of background from prestigious organizations. And this is widely spoken, the gender issues and the diversity, but not so well practiced. But this is really a sort of a wake-up call for all the organizations to start practicing it. Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Meta, the Facebook as we know it, once delivered a speech on gender issues. Right after the speech, she saw a woman participant waiting outside her office. She was under the impression that she is going to really praise me for these wonderful words. Instead, the women participant said, "I've learned something today." She continued, "I learned to raise my hand up." Towards the end of the speech, Sheryl told the participants, "You're all allowed to raise only 2 questions. I'm running short of time." The moment she told, all the women participants put their hands down. Men participants continued with the tirade of questions, which obviously exceeded the stipulated 2 questions. Sheryl later said, "Instead of my words inspiring the women participant, she gave me back a ton of bricks. Even though I have been focusing on gender issues, I have been blind to myself." This is a very powerful lesson. I had similar thing a few years back. We came up with the first ever global supply chain maturity model. The scary part is 95% is all designed by me. So when you open up to the corporates, it's not going to be easy. So I convinced my internal stakeholders and invited top-notch professionals from the industry to stay with me for 2 days in a star hotel in Chennai. After that, I was really happy. Then with a customary thing, we came up with a LinkedIn post. I was expecting a lot of likes and views, which we all look for in LinkedIn. And there was a woman participant from, and it's not a woman participant, she was a woman employee of Unilever. I still remember her name as well. I'll not quote here. She put on the comments, "I could see 12 men in your elite body of professionals, not a single woman there." I never kept it that way. I know that there is a woman leader included, but she dropped out in the last minute due to health reasons. I immediately picked up the phone and spoke to that women elite who missed that. And for that, I have to receive that comment. And I told her, you really put me in a real tight spot. But that is a powerful lesson for me to ensure that not one, I keep 50% in most of my initiatives as women representatives. It happened 4 years back or 3 years back. I practice it today. Even we have photo sessions, I ensure that women take the front seats in all my photo pictures, whatever we have, the knowledge sessions, we do it. Getting back to the industry, on an overall level, there is a representation of around 35 to 37% of women force in supply chain. If you look at the top of the ladder in the corporates, it was 17% in 2020, which or 2021. It dropped to 15% as we are talking today. So there is an urgent need to scale up this number. When you talk to the corporate leaders, they say that it is pretty difficult to retain the mid-career women because they don't have any visibility beyond that level. They drop out, which is not a healthy sign. those thoughts, I welcome all the panelists, and my first question will be to Sujatha and Narayan. Leonard Lauder of the famous skincare brand Estee Lauder once said, "Never make an important decision without a woman at the table." Do you believe that this will be a killer differentiator between an average and a built-to-last organization? If so, why?
Thank you, Mr. Seshadri, for the question. It's a great start. Thank the organizers, Dr. Tiwari, Dr. Agarwal, and yourself for inviting me. It's really a pleasure. And as you get older and in the corporate environment, it's such a pleasure to see students' faces. So, I'm particularly excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I think your question was, is it a killer differentiation, right? And killer is a little bit of a strong word, and I'm used to speaking my mind. Over the last decades and centuries, we've had corporations run and without a woman on the table, right? So if somebody asks you the question, I said, absolutely, it's a matter of success or failure. It's a little difficult to believe, but the world around us has changed, and that's something we have to keep in mind. But the first and foremost thing that I would say is that the table itself is important, right? And I always, every time I speak to a bunch of women, I talk about this, because you can't jump into diversity directly. You've got to start with the basics. You've got the hygiene factors. So any institution, organization, corporation needs to ensure that its table is soundly built, which is basically focused on, competence. Whether you're a woman, not a woman, it really doesn't matter, but you've got to have the competence, and you've got to have the right intent and attitude. You've got to think about the welfare of the organization. So once we assume this is in place, then the question is of how much does the gender diversity matter? And I think first and foremost, I will say it depends a lot on who your customer is, right? And I can see the gentleman from Estee Lauder saying that, because almost 100% of the people who buy that company's products is probably a woman. And it would be a disaster and certainly a killer situation if you don't have a woman on the table making the right decisions about the kind of products to launch, etc. And that is true for so many different segments. I mean, you talk about women's clothing, of course, but you talk about the kind of toys you have for your kids, the hospitals, schools, even cars today, and maybe even motorbikes and things like that, where there are as many women buying these things as men are. So it's certainly absolutely critical for women to be on the table, because that's the table that makes all the critical decisions of the products and services that gets out there. Now, for me, that's a perspective of diversity. I mean, diversity in general is really, really important. And why that is just purely because you get perspective. If you've got a bunch of, 60-year-old men from the south of India making decisions on what kind of shirts to launch in India, it obviously doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So to me, it's about diversity, and the diversity can really be anything. It can be age, it can be geographical, it can be gender, but bringing a diversity and the perspectives that come with this diversity is extremely critical. Now, why is it really important from a gender perspective? One, I've already talked about. When in most of the markets that most companies serve, including educational institutions such as NITIE, at least 50% of the population are women. And when your customers or your stakeholders are women, then it becomes absolutely critical to have enough women on the table. So that's the reason why I do think it's a differentiator, especially in today's world, which is so with the consumerism that has driven to an extent where there is so many companies participating. And with social media, the overload of information that's coming your way, people are making snap decisions. People are looking at very little information. There are influencers. So it becomes even more critical to have a well-balanced say on the table. And so I'll conclude by saying, killer or not, I think it's extremely strategic. It's important both for the short and the long-term future of organization. So yeah, that's my perspective.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Sujatha. My next question is to Sandhya Suri. A meager 8.2% of Fortune 500 CEOs are female. What are the top 3 reasons? Do we have a plan to course correct?
Well, good evening, everyone. I kind of, in terms of the reasons, I'm a pretty basic person when it comes to understanding human nature. And I feel that what is fundamental remains fundamental, which is people. No matter where you are, you may be driven by a lot of technology, but eventually it's people, right? Now, the top 3 reasons what you've asked in terms of why women are, lesser in percentage. This is my opinion. I probably have better speakers around who can probably give, a better perspective. For me, one is the topmost reason is self-rejection. It starts very, very early when you start applying for a job. You're looking at it, and until women are perfectionists by their very nature, they need to be 100% sure what they're going to do. So they start ticking off, okay, I qualify on this point, I qualify on that point. There may be 10 parameters, they will start ticking it off. And at some point, when they realize that the parameters are lesser, there is a self-rejection that comes in. Now, the self-rejection that comes in also that's the first phase. Now you're unsure about whether you should apply for that position or not, irrespective if it's a junior position or a top management position. Thereafter, what happens is when they go back and talk to their peers, their friends, what happens is here, it becomes a question of risk-taking capacity. When you speak to someone, you're allowing people to tell you whether you are enough or you're not enough. And a lot of that is a very subtle sense of gaslighting that happens by way of, infusing fear. What if it doesn't work out? You're going to fail, then what? So the fear of failure, I think, also because we tend to work 10 times harder to just prove ourselves. If I'm sitting idle, for example, it'll be, oh, she's idle. But if a person, normally a man is sitting and, sitting idle, he's thinking, he's strategizing. So that is one of the core reasons I feel we reject ourselves really quickly. That's one. Second is strategy. When you start strategizing, you need to make it a habit when you're climbing up the ladder. It's a tough journey, yes, but it's not impossible. At some point in the middle management, we tend to give up because we feel our strategy may not work, which is the second extension of self-rejection. We stop strategizing. It is important to be nimble. It's important to have great reflexes. It's also important to skill yourself to that. And if you are not in the habit of strategizing over and over again, and keeping it in a dynamic space, adaptation is slower. And we allow ourselves to be bullied into thinking that we cannot strategize. But women are great multitaskers. I mean, it's a proven point. And we don't use that skill to our benefits. That's the second point. Third is about changing the way you communicate. I think it's a major, major issue where when a man is speaking to a woman, he's confident. He's not using words like maybe, just, not trying to deflect and make things pleasant for somebody. They're head on. A very small example of it would be when a woman is walking on the road. Okay, there are 2 men coming or a man is approaching. She will automatically move aside because she doesn't want to ram into that person. And the knowledge is there that this person is not going to move. But the point is to be able to walk up and stop and put your stand and then make a step forward. If you make allowances for people and you shortchange yourself, your own accomplishments, you are, preparing yourself to be rejected by others as well. So communication, the way you communicate, instead of using things like just to, what would be the word is to minimize, to diminish the importance of what you're doing. And we continue to do that to make things comfortable around everybody because that's what we're preconditioned to do. But to be able to cross that barrier is very, very important when we get into, a stage where we want the top management positions. So it's very important to keep your eye on the goal. And women have had their darkness throughout. I don't think they're afraid of darkness. I think what they're really afraid of is shining in brilliance. essentially, who are you not to be? And that's the first question. You should keep striving for that brilliance. It doesn't matter where you are. Do it properly, do it well. So I think I'm going to stop here and, let's move on with the other questions. I'd really like to hear what everyone else has to say. Thank you.
Great thoughts, Sandhya. Thank you so much. We move on to Shubhrangsu. Men are promoted based on potential. Women are promoted based on past accomplishments. How can organizations spot the potential among women leaders and chart a career growth plan?
First of all, thanks to NITIE and the entire organizing team for inviting me here. As an alumni of NITIE, it's always a privilege to come back to the campus and share learnings. Coming to the question, I think my personal thoughts are we need to handle diversity and inclusion very intentionally. And I think it was put very nicely by Ms. Sujatha that the organization needs to define what does inclusion mean for you, what does diversity mean for you. But once you're clear, this is what you want to go for. It could be gender, it could be age, regional, whatever. That objective needs to be converted into a target or an objective which you can hold yourself accountable to. P&G globally has this VC equal commitment where we say we want to be 50-50 across all levels, across all functions, across all countries. Now that target setting, to me, once we define it and the fact that organization hire smart people, they figure out how to get there. So in this particular case where we want to get more people, more women to get promoted, once we define a target that we want to be 50-50 at our top levels, it automatically drives actions. And that is something which I have seen work wonderfully in P&G. And sorry to quote P&G because I've worked only in P&G for so long. But that I think helps. And once we do this, I think there are two additional points which I have seen work for me. One, potential gauging is not an overnight thing. I cannot come today and say, hey, I think this person needs to be promoted because he or she has potential. It is something which is planned over a period of time through various systems and processes. And something which is relatively strategic, which takes time in nature, you always have the luxury to plan it in advance. In this particular case, something which I strongly recommend doing is have your top talent, and this is not only women, but men and women, plan out what are they going to be 3 years down the line. And your top talent would be your top 15-25% of the organization. Do you have clearly roles mapped out? And then you say, these are the people I would want to become the next CEO or the next plant manager or the next operations head and so on. And then there has to be a capability or a leadership development program to support those people. Now, this goes into a cycle or a assessment similar to you would be reviewing top line, bottom line, cash or whatever measure. You also review this to see versus the plan that you have charted, are you really progressing or not? Many organizations, I think, one, they do not have the target. And if they do have the target, it's just on paper. There is nothing to support it. This succession planning kind of makes sure there is a solid plan to support this, growth that you are aspiring for. That is the second part of it. And third part of it is even going beyond that, things like, and I can share a story where we have this award, which is given to maybe 2% of the entire population in the company. When we kind of did an assessment and checked out who were the people who were nominated, we saw that there were of the 10 people nominated, let's say in the organization we were talking to, hardly out of the 10 people, only one was a female. And we were like, I don't think we have so less women. How is it so that so many of them got nominated? And said, but the projects did not make the cut. The question came, would it be a scenario that if they had delivered their projects, would they make the cut? And unfortunately, the answer came was probably not, because they were not even given the most meaty or difficult projects, which means that you look at each of your policies turn by turn and you say, are your decisions when you are allocating projects, are your decisions when you are, recognizing, rewarding individuals, are they gender agnostic? Or do you have, certain biases which are creeping in one way or the other? So I think a combination of this kind of helps to make sure that one, we have a target clearly defined, and then for each of the targets, we kind of, go behind it with, all the bells and whistles that are needed. In PNG, we say that, at our global board level, we have 12 members, and out of the 12 members, 6 are women. We have 10 global businesses, like the likes of Head and Shoulder and Pantene and so on. And out of the 10 businesses, 6 are led by women. When the CEO and the chairman can deliver their 50-50 target, any director level person who leads an organization of 10 or more has to at least ape them and deliver it in their organization. And I think that kind of creates a culture overall which drives better growth for women in any organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shubhrangsu. We move on to Ashita. Cultural messages are blatant. Baby clothes brand once sold smart like daddy for boys and pretty like mummy for girls. When a girl tried to lead, she's often labeled bossy. What are your top 3 suggestions to women for working around this challenge?
So thank you, Venkatesh, for the question. And first of all, I would want to thank Professor Upasana and NITIE team for giving me this privilege to come back to NITIE and talk about my experiences as well during this panel talk. So answering specifically on this question, I think first of all, I wouldn't want females to be, really worried about managing their image of being labeled bossy, which is again falling into a type of stereotyping. But nevertheless, a few suggestions which I would have for women leaders. The first one will be, building a personal connect with the team. As females, and I've gone through myself, we tend to act as, super professionals, managing our work-life balance, being super task-oriented. While it works really well when we are individual contributors, it might actually become a hindrance when we become leaders. So hence, we should spend time with our teams, not only knowing them professionally, but also personally. These personal connects really take the team performance to the next level. And I've seen those happening in my current role. The second suggestion from me would be practicing servant leadership. Again, this seems to be a lot of gyan, but the theme here is you should work for your team instead of the other way around. And I saw this being actually practiced by a senior leader here in Unilever. So he really cleared the path for his team members. And I started practicing it myself for last year and a half now. And I'm surprised at the teamwork and performance that servant leadership brings in. The third point which I would want to bring on the table is developing a sense of humor. Yeah, again, this is something I learned through my own experiences. You will find females generally taking everything more seriously versus men. And I've, again, done that throughout my career. While you put in the best in your job, ensure you don't miss out on the humor. It's a huge stress buster and puts others at ease as well. Yeah, so 3 big suggestions from my end. Build personal connect with your team, practice servant leadership, and third, develop a sense of humor. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Ashita. I like that. And the humor is a very important part. And for those who have not picked up the book, Humanocracy, I would suggest please take that up. So how we miss that in today's world, in the corporate world, when especially under too much stress, we miss out that. And there are some delicate balances to be struck. So that's a brilliant book. So I would suggest you all to pick it up. Another important point you brought in was the human touch. Like there was a blog which I came across a few years back, why so many Indians are so successful in US companies as CEOs. So now the numbers are really expanding. They say that when you have any other CEO, he just talks about business. When you have an Indian CEO, probably towards the end of the day, he may ask you, by the way, how is your family doing? That's the touch they have brought in. And also there was a relationship it brought in, like how the Indian Jugaad has also helped. So it is, it was told in a wrong context earlier. Now I see a lot of the CEOs in my network, they say that gone are the days you have to go and take a 4 hours or 17 hours flight to the Western side and bring some best practices. When you see in India, we have been creeping that it's such a complex country. And when you see that it's working in India, it's a cakewalk for you in the Western part of the world. So those are things we really carry a lot of advantages with us. Thank you so much. Move on to Sharmista. Women's assumption is that to excel in both professional and personal life could be impossible. Is this correct? What are the top remedies?
Thank you, Venkatesh, for the question. And let me start by thanking Upasana and NITIE for having me here. The beauty of this conversation, Venkatesh, is how cumulative it is. You see, I think I am in here in presence of thought leadership from all the top corporates, but more importantly, such amazing human beings, Sujatha, Shubhrangsu, Lieutenant Sandhya, Ashita. I think all the points that you made and the book references, Venkatesh, they're really helpful. So I made some notes myself, and I think I'm learning as much as anybody on the table today. Coming to the question, there are a few words that I picked when you asked me that question. And the answer starts with the question itself. You said assumption. This, I think Lieutenant Sandhya was earlier referring to allowances that women make. I think I'll add to that the assumptions that women make are preposterously higher than men do. And I think I have gone there in the dark side myself. The amount of imposter syndrome that women carry. When I became the manufacturing leader, I had not had manufacturing experience previously. Had it been not for the champions of diversity and talent in my own organization and in my community, in my friends and in my family, I think every day I would suffer with imposter syndrome, wondering, am I good enough for the job? So I think women do that more often. So the first thing is, even before I talk about that as a remedy, I think that would be a huge personal advice to anybody, who wants to take that up. Do not assume. People will do that for you. And they're doing it left, right, and center everywhere you go. So don't do that. It's such a waste of time. It's waste of energy. And when I say energy, coming back to the other part of the question that you said, work-life balance, I have a tad bit different perspective on that. Personally, I have never looked at it from a time, parameter. So weekdays and weekends, usually that is how work-life balance is defined. Unfortunately, that is not how I see it. I see the balance that we need to bring in is in energy. That is in your physical energy, your emotional energy, your spiritual energy, and all of the kinds of energies that one brings to work as well as in personal life. So it's possible that I want to take a Wednesday morning off and work on a Saturday afternoon, and that's fine, right? And that's the flexibility that organizations such as Shubhrangsu was mentioning, P&G, I'm sure HUL, all the organizations, including J&J, they are waking up to the fact that that is how it's going to work. And pandemic, I think Venkatesh has been absolutely a big clarion call for everybody. Health is important. We need to focus on our health, our energies. And also it has brought back the focus on to women at workplace, because women invariably burnt out more than men during the pandemic. And I think my suggestion number 2 would be for women in workplace to not, again, the assumption that I was talking about, don't see yourself as a problem if you're burning out. Look at the system that you are trying to work in, whether it's at home or whether it's at work. Ask for help and hold people accountable, whether it's your partner, your friends, your family, whether it's team member, your boss, hold them accountable, because you are doing more than others, especially, when there is crisis. So that's point number 2. And last, I think, and also something that Ashita mentioned about, I would call that relationship capital, the network, which is absolutely important, because that in many ways takes away the heat that you put to yourself and also what you feel around you. Relationship capital is not just making friends at work. It is networking, seeing how you can accelerate your career, See when you can take a back seat and hold other people accountable and let them take the baton when you are feeling exhausted, and all the other places where you think you will need help. So I'll just reiterate. Point number one, you need to prioritize yourself. Do not assume, and ask for help and build relationship capital. Venkatesh, over to you. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I really like those points. And also you brought a very interesting thing about the imposter syndrome. For those who have not picked the book, Think Again by Professor Adam Grant, I'm sure like many of you might have read that. That brings in a different perspective on this. Those are really great points. Thank you so much. We move on to Savita Gupta. Interestingly, she's part of our elite community of C-suite professionals within the Center of Excellence as well. When a man is successful, he is liked by both men and women. When a woman is successful, people of both genders like her less. This truth is both shocking and unsurprising. How can we address this?
Hi, Venkatesh, and I'm really sorry to join in late. Absolutely not the intention, but it's just that switching between calls had to happen, and that took a bit of time. I'm extremely sorry. And thank you to the NITIE team. I think it's an honor to be here and with such community of panelists as well. Coming to the point, I think, when you say women like, both men and women like successful women less, I think it's not always true. People, be it men or women, who have been through what another woman is going through while climbing the stairs to success, understand that and kind of respect it. Also, I think people who are climbing the ladder of success are setting an example that is inspiring others. So, there are two sets of people who definitely do not hate you for that. And when it comes to, I think, jealousy or dislike that people may feel, I think it's primarily when it comes to men, or I think it's because they feel threatened, or they may feel threatened. I think that's what it's a sort of replacement of what could have been mine, and is not possible now. And I think when it comes to women, I really don't think it's more of hatred, as you put, or dislike. I think it's around what is being compromised when the success is being achieved. And I think that's quite a traditional, old, but however, I think most of the people around us in our families and our communities are with the patriarchal mindset that has been the tradition. But I don't think anyone is stopping you while really climbing. I think one of the other things that as a women leader or as a women employee, one should be cognizant of is how much of it is herd mentality, right? And that how can you help change it by coaching when you face a situation where you are seeing that there are inherent biases that are coming your way and blocking your growth or learning. I think you have a task there to coach the person by just being more interactive and actually presenting yourself as a professional, and beyond just representing a gender. I think that sometimes the onus comes down to women on how they are really putting it across to win over people who may be disliking them at first. I think that's how I see it.
Excellent, Savita. Thank you so much for your inputs. And we move back to Sujatha. When a man helps a colleague, the recipient feels indebted to him and is highly likely to return the favor. But when a woman helps, the feeling of indebtedness is weaker. Is this gender discount real? What could a business leader do to address this?
So, my instinctive and immediate answer is it's not real. And the reason I say that, and it's surely not true, but the reason I say that is I've never faced it, right? And ultimately your thoughts and opinions are a product of your own experiences. And it's interesting. A lot of times I sit in these panels and I hear things that I have not experienced. And I've given it a lot of thought as to why, and I'll just get to that in a second. But this question of give and take in the workplace, right? To me, I worked on the principle of an emotional bank balance. So you deposit when you can, you withdraw when you can, and you generally keep that bank balance healthy. And that's always worked out. And I've not seen a difference between having that relationship with a man or a woman. But I do have one point to make, which may explain why I don't feel that this is real, but it's probably real because you're asking me this question, which means this topic is out there. Somebody's written about it, somebody's felt it. My response is that it's very difficult to know, right? Because there's just too many variables. If you're a scientist, you know that you run an experiment with too many variables and you cannot pick what's the root cause of your problem. So then the way I look at it is that, and I often advise women, don't make everything that happens to you about being a woman, right? There are tons of experiences we go through. And I think Savita was also kind of referring to that just now, is that when we go through our, let's say, work life and things happen to us, some pleasant, some unpleasant, a lot of it, especially in multinational companies, I have to say, I think, and almost everybody here representing a multinational company, very little of what's really happening to you is truly because you're a woman, but it's circumstantial. It's politics, it's mood of the day, it's the business pressure. So, that's always what I felt. But even if it's not true, I see many women, women students here. I say, just assume that it's not happening to you because you're a woman, because it gives you power, right? Because what happens when you think, hey, I'm a woman, that's why he's doing this, and that's why I'm not getting credit for this help that I gave, is you're making yourself to be a victim, and you're losing power in the process, and you're taking that power and you're giving it to somebody else. Now, unless, of course, it affects your career, there is harassment, all that. Those are really big things, and those are a real problem. But these subtle things, I just say, hey, put on a thicker skin than you have, and it becomes a lot easier to handle. I've had this, and I want to give a couple of examples. The first example, in one of my jobs, I was in this management team with a boss, 9 guys and myself, right? And for some reason, this guy the boss did not like me. And it was me who he disliked the most. And for the longest time, we kept working on this, we kept clashing, and not even once in this entire 4-year time frame did it strike me that it could have anything to do with the fact that I'm a woman. I felt he was threatened. I thought he was being difficult. I think he was being unreasonable, unfair. It just didn't even strike me that being a woman could have anything to do with it, till somebody told me, hey, I think he's a chauvinist. I'm like, hey, I didn't even think about that, right? Similarly, when in my last job, for the first time, I moved from R&D to business, right? I spent my entire career in R&D, and I got a job as a general manager of one of the businesses. And, I thought, hey, I'd been a high potential employee for 7 years. I'd been demonstrating business acumen, customer centricity, getting essentially anything that I was given got done well. And so I got this job, and it was a fantastic opportunity and took it. And then when I had conversations with some people, they said, hey, you know what? They're trying to increase the diversity in the business space. And these are colleagues, right, who didn't get the job. So, and I dismissed them right there. And then I said, I really did tell them, I think that's bullshit, right? So I'm a big believer that what happens to you, a lot of times you have control over it. Not all the time. There is discrimination. I don't want to minimize that in any way. So I want to definitely have the women in this audience take that. It's worked for me. Now, it could be there is something happening, but you don't have to acknowledge it. And when you don't acknowledge it, it's not real. It's a little bit like the Schrodinger's cat, right? You don't know if it's dead or alive. I'm sure you seem so well read, so you know what I'm talking about. The second part of your question was, what can organization and leaders do about it? And I think it's a very difficult thing, because when you talk about helping a colleague, it's an intense, informal, personal one-to-one thing, right? And if everything cannot go and say, hey, I did this, you just can't do it, especially as you get more senior. You really can't be telling the organization all the small things that you did. It's all about the results that you deliver and the people that you coach and grow. So the only thing I can think of is that, leaders can emulate this behavior, right? If you're a male leader or a female leader, and there are people helping you, you develop the culture of acknowledging, appreciating. You can also systematize this. For example, at Wabtec today, I brought in a system called Spotlight. And what Spotlight does is At any given point of time, if somebody does something for you, which is not a part of their regular jobs, it goes from a simple thank you to a spot award, to a star award, to an excellence award. So, and we give a tremendous amount of autonomy to the large population to give out these awards to acknowledge. And we monitor that. We monitor, who is acknowledging. And so there is enough, and we publish it and things like that. Yeah, and so those are my main points that, systematizing it could help in terms of what leaders can do. Leading by example is another one. Building a culture of high level of collaboration where you reward and award teamwork more than you think. So these are all general principles, nothing to do with gender diversity. But when it comes to the gender issue, you brought up the gender discounting was the first time I heard this word. I think, developing a thick skin is the solution I would offer. And the world is changing, though. I can clearly tell that things are getting better. So I think at least the audience here who are going to get jobs in the next year or so are better off than when we came into the workplace. But from day one, I've worked now for 23 years, right? I have really not encountered any kind of sexual discrimination, right? Now, I am sure it's happened to me. I just don't have a clue that it's happening to me. So, and it's worked beautifully. I've been at peace, I've been confident, and I've been successful. And so I think that's worked. So those are my thoughts. Back to you, Venkatesh.
Awesome, Sujatha. That's really very inspiring words. And I'm sure, like many of the, as you rightly said, maybe there are a lot of students who will be taking up the career that will be really handy for them when they hit the career, in just few months from now, or probably a year from now. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sujatha. And we move on to Sandhya. Women only apply for open jobs in Fortune 500 companies if they think they meet 100% of the listed criteria. Men apply if they see 60% closeness. What's the suggestion to women?
Well, Venkatesh, it's been a very, very engaging panel talk so far. And I think at the cost of repeating myself from the previous question that you asked me, I think and believe that, there's certain things women need to do, to be able to cover up that self-doubt that they consistently have. You have to believe in yourself. That's very primary. You need to set your goals, but also be dynamic in your approach. You need course correction all the time. Keep your goal in mind, but course correction is really important. So that's one. Second thing is you need to start taking risks. If you do not achieve that 100%, you have to remind yourself, everything is not perfect. It will never be. There are perfect moments. And you need to be able to grab that opportunity, believing that it's the perfect moment to apply. I have not stopped applying for, positions which were way beyond my reach, just to see how it feels. And it still encourages you to continue to do that. So that's one of them. Then don't think too much about what if you fail when you're applying. Apply with this thought that what if you succeed? You have a position where you can make a huge difference and inspire other people to follow through. So where you are setting your success parameters, you also need to understand that your success parameters are not defined by how other people perceive it. You need to set that for yourself. Personally, for me, it's ticking off things from my bucket list. So I've always followed that. And it's worked beautifully for me. Fortune 500, if I look at it, I'll have to put it on my bucket list first. Then I'll go for it. Right now, I love what I'm doing. So that's the other part of it. Second thing is, you have to keep at it. Please allow your talent and all your acquired skill, apply it. Do not trivialize your success and learn from things that you have not been able to achieve. So where is your course correction? And don't trivialize it, for example. The other thing is speaking up. That's important. You have to speak up. In today's time where, branding, personal branding is really, really important. We've gotten into the habit of not believing until we see it and read it. Okay, it's the rule, the biggest curse and blessing of our times. We can choose how we want to take it. And in today's time, where visual is really important and it's prime. Be seen, be heard, and please be understood. That's very important. You need to include the men in the discussion. It's very important. You want women empowerment, you want inclusivity. You cannot have, an entire seminar full of women. I'm so glad there are men in this, because if you are empowering women, right, to succeed, how are you teaching the men to deal with these empowered women? That's the other part. You have to be able to find that balance and, keep at it. Keeping a sense of humor intact, that's very important, and it's already been spoken for, so I'm not going to get into that. A lot of it is also about every time you succeed, people feel that you should be obligated for the, it seems like it's like a favor done to you. But the truth is that you need to be grateful for what's being placed at your table, the opportunities that you're being given. But obligation needs to be shared after a point. We women are very, very adept at carrying guilt, right? You're not Atlas. You're not supposed to be carrying the weight of the world or a mountain on your shoulder. A mountain's supposed to be climbed, right? You're not supposed to be carrying it on your shoulder. You've got to shed that, start climbing it. And, we feel guilty about, like I was talking about guilt, we feel guilty about almost everything. Please be kind to yourself. And you need to celebrate your successes as much as you mourn your failures. And you consider them as failures. I don't look at them as failures. I look at them as opportunities to learn. So it's a huge learning curve. That's the other part. And I have learned that there are 3 lessons that apply mostly to almost everything that you can do in life for being successful professionally, in relationships and otherwise. Not that I'm perfect. I'm pretty wild when it comes to, saying stuff. So I'm not perfect at all, but you need to reward what you want repeated. So if, for example, me as an HR professional, if I'm rewarding somebody for something that I don't want repeated, I'm encouraging wrong things, right? So that's one lesson. The next lesson for me is figuring out, what do people part with money for? And that is the essence of business. No matter what department you're in, people are willing to part with money only when they are happy. Women go shopping when they're happy or depressed, right? Men go shopping only when they need stuff. There's a basic gender difference there. But the truth of it is, any person, any individual, irrespective of gender, will part with money when they're happy. Or the second reason is when you solve their problems. If you've got this pat down for anything and keep that in focus, you can go wherever you feel like, and it's just going to work. But inclusivity, when we're talking about inclusivity and diversity, which has become such a huge thing, please include all genders in your conversation. It's very important. It's important for impact, it's important for change, and it's important for constant upskilling. So I'm done for now. Thank you, Venkatesh.
That's great, Sandhya. And some great inputs on the shopping of the women and men. I've heard it for the first time. That's really great. I liked it. We move on to Shubhrangsu. Men don't have to legitimize their negotiations. They're expected to look out for themselves. Women, however, must justify the requests. How do we address this reality?
So I think a very good question. And I think I have also been a big follower of the whole Lean-In book from Sheryl Sandberg with a lot of examples which I to cover this area. So I think for women, definitely, and since we are talking about women in supply chains, I think one of the things that does impact is many of our supply chain roles today, given where we are in terms of the gender equality journey. I have seen girls when they join in manufacturing locations, which are typically not in the big cities, there is often networks missing, wherein they can go and try and understand what is acceptable, what is reasonable, and so on. I think that one thing which the book Lean-In also talks about, and something which I have seen work very well, are having the right networks and right mentors introduced earlier in the career, where they kind of develop this, communication skill, for simplicity's sake, if I were to put it, on what can they say, what can they ask for, and so on. Something else that has also worked for me, and this was a classic example where I had a female reportee working in warehouse, and she was traveling quite a bit of distance by a bus, and then a second bus to come to office. And when she actually came and talked to me that, hey, and after almost a month of travel, while she was pregnant, she was doing this travel, and she came to me and said, I'm facing a lot of trouble. And I was like, hey, did you read the company policy? The company policy allows you to, incur a cab to drop you during the period of your pregnancy in a particular month. And she was like, hey, I don't know. So that was again an eye opener for me. Certain places, if you want to remove the negotiation, try to make it objective. If you can define the right policies, you do not really need to go and negotiate. So that, I think, is the second part of it. And the third part of it is, as we groom women as leaders for the organization, who are the negotiating their causes for would be the people who are taking decisions. And that goes to the point that Sandhya was talking about developing, getting men to be sensitized about this whole concept. And we have this wonderful program called Men Advocating Real Change. We call it the MARC program, or Men Advocating Real Change, which primarily does an intensive course. And this is not just a PowerPoint deck, but real role models talking about things that are different, biases that we carry, and how can we be very sensitive about taking some of the decisions that we take on a regular basis. And this is something that has worked wonderfully in my organization, which after I did the training, I think I was being able to realize where when I was on the table, someone is not talking, really getting the table open to at least hear the female on the table as to what their ideas are. Are they really not having ideas genuinely, or is it that they are just not very sure and therefore they are not sharing? And this, over a period of time, with the right amount of coaching and feedback, has helped grow. Something else which I have tried out is, we definitely want more women on the discussion table. Now, we do not by design today have that, but the way we can get it, and this is a bit of a smart thinking, is getting women mentors for the men who are in decision-making positions, so that the key decisions they can kind of go run through their women mentors. I have had someone who's joined from college and was the only lady in my organization some point of time mentor me. This is like in concept of reverse mentoring, telling about things that I was probably being blind to, things that I was missing out, and how I could probably make better decisions if I could just run through them on some of these decisions. So those, I think, have helped get women in a position where they probably don't need to negotiate. And while we are kind of training the women to start negotiating a bit, or putting their great points together, I think we can also spend some energy in our men to kind of do lesser shooting from the hips, which I think will be good effort invested in both sides.
Absolutely. They are very useful points, Shubhrangsu. Thank you so much for sharing that. We move on to Ashita. Women often get paid less than men. Have you seen women negotiating more often? Does it weaken their chances to secure leadership roles?
Okay, again, thanks for the question, Venkatesh. Kind of relating to what Sujatha mentioned, in my experience, having worked with Nestle, J&J, and now Unilever, the kind of D&I programs that we've had, I haven't really seen women getting paid at same levels. But I'll tell you what happens is when you take a maternity break, since your performance is rated relative to others, you might get impacted. So while as leaders, we try and get these corrected whenever we see these individual cases, and at an organization level as well, there are policies that are getting implemented. It's very, very important for the individual herself, to ask for it. So one thing my leader in Nestle a long time back told me when I was shy of negotiating or asking for things, he said, Ashita, even a child doesn't get milk if he doesn't cry. Yeah, worst case, what will happen? They'll reject it. But the chance of getting it, if you ask for it, is much more versus not asking for it. Hence, we should negotiate with facts, determination, and, you will secure what you deserve, whether it's a role, salary, or even minor deviation to support you during your life stages. So that's been very, very helpful for me. And I have a lot of personal examples, whether it was, helping out with my daughter's international medical expenses. And I still remember J&J reached out to me when they were recruiting, and I was in the 9th month, and I delivered my son. And on the 40th day, I was negotiating with them on the salary, understanding the role. Yeah, so it's very important that you put facts on the table and ask for things. Worst case, what will happen? But it will be rejected. And just on a humorous note, between me and my husband, so I'm a North Indian from Chandigarh, and he's a Maharashtrian. So I am the one who negotiates more versus him. So I don't know if it's a man versus women trait or a North Indian versus a West Indian thing in our case.
I like those points. Thank you so much, and Ashita. Yeah, I mean, we have to go with the flow and make it really happen. Worst case scenarios, just leave it to them, and it's okay. So yeah, those are great points. And we move on to Sharmishta. You don't have to be a policymaker to bring the systematic change or encouraging women in leadership roles. Can you suggest one simple way any leader can introduce to encourage active women participation?
Great question, and a very urgent and important one, Venkatesh. I think looking at the statistics globally, when you look at beyond supply chain, I think global labor force today has less than 50%, I think borderline 50% of women in workforce. And that is a remarkably sad statistics. When you talk about systematic policy making, I think it has to move from, and you definitely said that there is systematic policy making, but what can one do at grassroots? But even policy making now has to move from the philosophical discussion of gender diversity, importance of it, urgency of it, of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and make it more operational and tactical. Organizations, of course, have woken up to the fact that it's strategic. Diversity is equivalent to innovation. More ideas need to be on the table. If we have to talk about anything, futuristic, we need to bring more and more genders, thoughts, different opinions, ideas to the table. So policy making has to convert into more tactical policy making, grassroots level. And one thing that really makes a difference is on one hand, of course, these strong policies that are action oriented. On the other hand, we need actual change agents on the ground. Shubhrangsu mentioned the wonderful program Mark, and the organizations across the board are investing in these conversations and actions, because these change agents who are managers of small, big teams, middle level managers, or even people, in the different sections, even in the supply chain, because they need to flex different muscles of inclusion to have different genders feel welcome to the table and to speak up. For example, across supply chain, you would see there are some sections who are in a different demographics, like a manufacturing plant, completely different setup versus a corporate team that is sitting in a plush office in a city. Inclusion would mean completely different things for women to feel welcome in these places. A manufacturing plant may need basic hygiene things like safe workplace, safe transportation, more women at workplace, women security guards, women, washrooms on different floors, gender neutral ergonomics in the machinery that they use. All of these things actually are equivalent to equity and inclusion, the psychological safety that one needs to feel when they come to work. In corporate offices, same thing would apply, but maybe in a different parameter. At end of the day, it is the competency and skill that these change agents need to see. Because one thing that I think over the course of my career, I now feel is talked very loosely, and probably the narrative has to change. We put all women in one bucket and talk about diversity. That narrative itself is wrong in many ways. We have to talk about talent, skill, competency, profile your talent. Yes, gender is one of the important factors because it's so visual. But there are other things in the attributes of that talent that are important to profile for you to accelerate them. The change agents have to do that. And finally, because it burns at both ends, it's also for women to do all the wonderful things that all the panelists talk about. I believe your extraordinary is in your ordinary. Do your ordinary well, perform well, make your mark, speak up, be loud, make noise. If you're going out, bang the door behind you, make that noise. Be that extraordinary in your ordinary. I think nobody will be able to miss, noticing you and appreciating or accelerating you. And that was my time. Thanks.
That's brilliant. And there are some brilliant practical tips for the corporates, and I could see a very clear set of approaches for the one sitting in the corporate office and the one out in the manufacturing. I worked in both the places. It's completely different. It's not easy for the women in especially the industrial zones. It's not easy. Whatever you see in Mumbai, like city, like traveling is so easy, pretty safe. That's completely different in the industrial areas. Yeah, those are really wonderful points, Shamis. I love that. Thank you very much. We moved on to Savita. The toys we give to children and the traits they are assigned can have lasting impacts on their lives. Do we need to stop doing this? How?
I think if we are limiting, and I think it's more from parents that toys are coming to children from rather than, organizations, but then what organizations can do to ensure that, there is sensitization among the employees is how we kind of, associate tasks or activities between what men are perceived to be good at versus what women are perceived to be good at. I'm just giving very, very basic examples like, there is Rangoli competition and it's erstwhile, right? Before we all move to work from home, right? What do you expect? How do you imagine the participation to be like? And on the other hand, if there is, you have to figure out that which iPhone to buy or which phone to buy, right? Whom do you approach to? What kind of audience do you really see, right? So that's where it comes from. So I think probably we need to encourage activities which are on the cultural side of things, and we have to see how we come up with it to ensure it drives down that, there is no gender difference in terms of activities. And when it comes to toys, I think it's also coming from corporates. If you really see, marketing around pink versus blue starts from Mother Care and all the associated brands and equivalent brands. It goes on to Hamleys. When you enter and ask, they're like, whom are you looking for, a boy or a girl? Does it matter? It's a toy, right? I mean, so aren't those people trained by us, right? How are you communicating it? What are you showing? And then it also associates with the society, because then you end up buying similar gifts and then you end up buying, similar things because, if by chance it's not, it's from the other gender, it will be visible, right, on the child. And I think we have to kind of refine our communication around that as well. And how you do it, it's going to be not very easy. So that's one. And third thing on toys per se is if you are limiting a choice of toys to a kid, I think you are limiting how much your kid ultimately imagines as a kid. And I think fourth thing is there's nurture and nature, right? Ultimately, while growing up, the person is going to be exposed to multiple things. So I don't think that impressions that are coming from toys are really going to last as long. But yes, they're going to be first impressions. And probably, I think that's what I have to say when it comes to toys.
That's a really great points. And yeah, I mean, many times I could see the pink cycle, and the male kids will say, no, I don't want the pink cycle. That it's so ingrained into our society. And what is important, we have to leave it at that stage, and we keep moving on from there. So now we get back to each one of these panelists with just 20 seconds rapid fire max. Just one point you would like to carry from here, and you want to get it deployed in your workplace. Starting from Sujatha.
So, coming from a highly engineering industrial background, where we don't have the 50% that Shubhrangsu was talking about. I think the problem statement lies in two areas. One is the base. If you hire more women at the base, then I think you will have more women at top. It's because, you're coming 20 years behind, right, in this whole journey. The second piece of it is, how do you make people stay? You said that right in the beginning, in the middle level people, how do you make them stay? So I think one is about, how do you make it conducive for them to work? Simple things like childcare. We talked about commute. We talked about appreciation, loyalty. I mean, loyalty of women is very easy to earn if you do the right things. So those would be my main thoughts. It's not about just talking about board members or leaders, but it's about how do you structurally and systematically drive the gender diversity up in organizations.
That's well said. Thank you, Sujatha, for that. And move on to Sandhya.
Sorry. Well, in my workplace, first of all, the organization I'm working for deals with sustainable energy products, which essentially means a lot of engineers are coming in. And in terms of the workplace differences and initiation of change, I found that it's much easier and to bring about change when you bring in the millennials into the system. They're more accepting of the other gender. They don't discriminate. They're not averse to who the person is or what their sexual preferences are, for example, or who they are speaking to. They hang out together. So it's a beautiful younger workforce. The tough part about that younger workforce is that they have to deal with middle-aged men and women, and the top management, which is mostly very, seasoned players in the market who want things done in a certain manner. So bringing about change in terms of bringing in more freshers is the first point. Even in this, when we are bringing in fresher engineers and we have a program for them, I find women applicants, when they come in, when we start hiring them, the most difficult decision for them is it a field job? Or is it a job that I have to sit in office and do it? Safety matters. So while I can place people at the head office, I find more women are very averse to being placed in their own locations, primary locations, because the engineering technical work involves service. And you're dealing in a trade, which is essentially batteries, where you're dealing with people who are not sensitized to women workforce. So that is a challenge, for example, that I have in this organization. But what I do is, in the process of hiring, I'm fair to the process. I look for people who have professional ethics. So when I'm hiring somebody for middle management or top management, I'm looking for people who are fair, irrespective of gender, people who can initiate change. A simple, we talked about making things a little comfortable for women who come in and work. Trivializing, for example, pain during the menstrual cycle. People actually need to get sensitized on PMS. It is real. Abdominal pain, it is real. Now, pain is measured by your capacity to tolerate it. Women have a huge capacity, but it doesn't make it any lesser. One cannot fathom something that they have not experienced. One of the first things that I did once I joined was immediately within the next 3 days, I brought in all the women in the organization into my office and I said, I want hygiene to be maintained in the restrooms that you're using for yourself first, more than anything else. Second introduction was to bring in sanitary napkins and tell them there are emergency napkins available. You can just ask for it or we will leave it there. Use it on emergency. You don't have to rush or be embarrassed by it. It's a part of whatever is going on. The third part is including men in that conversation is so important. So I keep doing this. A lot of our women workforce here in this organization are far more successful. They perform way better. They're far more motivated. But change is very, very slow in terms of acceptance of successful people who are performing really well. So that is one where being fair to the process is very, very important. So while we move out of our comfort zone, I think there are a lot of perspectives that we need to gather up. And thank you for that time to be able to share my own perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandhya. Moving on to Shubhrangsu for the 22nd.
Just to make it 22nd, I think wonderful set of speakers here, a lot of things to learn. I personally partner with NITIE. We organize this annual Equality Summit every year. We reach out to some 400 campuses across the country, inviting more women to join STEM careers, more women to join supply chain careers. Of course, with the bus, like our motive to have some of them landing up at PNG for sure. So I would love all of you to also join us in this event. It's coming up on 4th March. And great thoughts from all of you. I'll take notes, and a lot of them I'll go back and try to implement in my organization. The one I loved the most was about, being ordinary, as Shwarmishra said. Be your ordinary, and that itself is extraordinary. So every time I interact with a woman leader, I would try to keep that in mind.
Fantastic. Moving on to Ashita.
Yeah, okay, maybe I won't be able to finish in 20 seconds, but my one bit, and I think it wasn't kind of covered in the discussion, is, and I worked with, organizations which have been really progressive on the D&I, but still what is required is that you need to change the mindset of managers and leaders that don't assume females require comfortable jobs or comfortable locations. Yeah, a lot of times, even without asking us, they assume, yeah, Ashita, she's married, she would want to be in a metro with kids, she wouldn't want to be comfortable in a factory location, or even if it's a factory location, let's, have something which is closer to metro. Ask them before assuming they won't do it. Give them those challenging roles. So if it is that, what Shubhrangsu spoke about, 50-50, give 50% also the challenging roles. Offer it to females before, they take a decision, rather than you assuming yourself that let's give them a, a comfortable role or a easier role, is what I would, challenge and change mindset, even in progressive organization like ours, Venkatesh.
Fantastic, Ashita. I like that. We moved on to Sharmista.
Thank you, Venkatesh. Not sure if we will have time at the end. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the wonderful questions and all that I learned today. I think if I have to take that one step, like you asked in your question, I think I'll continue to spend 10% or more of my time developing people around me. That includes not just my team, people who come in contact with me through coaching, through mentoring, and listen more to people. Sorry, that was my phone. Listen more to different perspectives of people. Why I say this is, even in conversation today, I realized this very starkly, that we definitely come from our experiences, but we also come from our agencies, and most of us are more privileged than a lot of them out there. So those agencies have to be equitable, and we are those change agents who can make that happen. So we have to take that burden of the truth that this happens, and be those agents of change. Turn off the cameras, nobody is watching, don't assume, and keep powering through. There are people who are looking up to you for the smallest of impact that you will have, your words will have, your actions will have. So I think the building of personal brand, like Lieutenant Sandhya was saying, that is as much important for me as much as it is for people who are watching me in any way that I can impact their life and career. So I take that responsibility, and I'll continue to strive towards that. Thank you so much, Venkatesh.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sharmista. And we move on to Savita.
Wonderful thoughts there from everyone. I think wrapping up in 20 seconds, I strongly feel a lot of times that that's happening, right? In terms of just getting D&I agenda through, we are filling in positions, which I think, as Ashita mentioned, are assumed that women would be comfortable with. What we should really be doing is putting them right in front and, give them sales role, give them the roles that are customer facing, that are putting them on the negotiating table, give them challenging roles and probably push them. I think risk with few people who may not be there, but, who can be there by training and coaching and, really ensure that your front end force that is getting you business, that is, doing the crucial work of signing the papers for the company is made up of women. And I think that is going to also drive in how the decisions are made, because those are the women who are going to rise up. And I think a lot of women also should be doing that and asking for those, even if it means, basically few midnight oil. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I drive consciously and want to continue to. Yeah.
Fantastic. Those are brilliant points. I think there are a lot of takeaways from this session. And Jeff Bezos, in his parting note, said, the world wants you to be identical. Don't let it happen. So today's business needs a high-speed elevator powered by innovative approaches. Scaling up presence of women in your organization can really power your organization to great heights. And it's always said that if you want to beat your competitor, don't follow them. Just do exactly the reverse way. So if your competitors are not having the gender diversity, not in deploying women, and like Sujatha said, no, we need more people at the bottom now. So you see, then we'll see the things happening at the top. So those are really the need of the hour. And if your competitors are not doing it, just do it today. And my suggestion is, like, based on what I practice, is target 50%. I know that Shubhrangsu told that. So could be a bit ambitious target, but that's a nice place to start. And I'm sure like things will really take on from there. With those thoughts, and I'll hand over to Professor Ruchita.
Thank you so much, Mr. Venkatesh Seshadri, for enlightening discussion and moderating this session so effortlessly with your commendable style. Thank you very much, sir. I thank our distinguished panelists, Sujatha, Narayan, for her visionary approach throughout the session, Sandhya, Suri, for her exemplary contribution and highlighting on personal branding. This is really very important. Shubhrangsu Dutta for bringing supply chain diversity and practices onto the table in a broader perspective. Ashita Mittal for a dynamic mindset and vision and highlighting about 3 aspects that are personal connect, work for your team, and definitely bring humor. Sharmishta Bishwas for her leadership and skill set. The important thing, do not assume, ask for help, hold someone accountable, and create your network. And Savita Gupta for a thought-provoking approach. This event was the first in our way forward to discuss the current trends in supply chain management and the role of diverse workforce in it. When it comes to creating a new world, diversity and inclusion can become a game changer. This first event of DE&I Cell of NITIE turned into reality under the leadership of Director Professor Manoj Kumar Tiwari, sir, who has been a constant source of motivation and guidance for embracing diversity and equity. Without his vision, the event would not have been possible and successful. Thank you very much, sir. Sincere gratitude to our deans, Dean Shrik, Professor Vivekanand Khanapuri, sir, Associate Dean, Planning and Coordination, Professor Vivek Khanzore, sir, Dean, Alumni and International Affairs, Professor Shirish Sangle, Dean, Student Affairs and Placements, Professor Hema Tate, Associate Dean, Placement and Branding Activities, Professor Prof. Iqbal, sir. Thank you very much, sir and madam. The panel conceptualization was a joint effort of DE&I Cell coordinators, led by Professor Upasana Agarwal, Professor Ruchita Gupta, Professor Poonam Mehra Singh, and Professor Manik Majumdar. Thank you very much, team. Student team is always the backbone of any event. The student team was led by VLFM event coordinator Chinu Bharadwaj, Smriti Singh, Devlina Datta, Shaz Noor, Paras. And I thank all the students. Please forgive me if I forgot to take your names. On behalf of NITIE, I once again would like to express my sincere appreciation and gratitude to all the moderators, presenters, participants for very active and insightful discussion and contributing towards this great cause, which has made the panel discussion very, very fruitful. Thank you, everyone. I would request everyone to switch on their cameras so that we can have a group photograph for a memory. Thank you. Stay safe and healthy, but let's take a group photograph.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, participants, for being there and being a part of this conversation. I extend my gratitude, sincere one, to each panelist who's taken time out for it. Thank you very much, and see you again very soon.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.